Hey everyone, welcome back to Three Simple Men Making Their Way Through the Galaxy. I'm Tom. Is with me is Ryan and Mike, and today is episode 4, where we dive into the Phantom Menace. Fellas, how are we doing today?
I'm great. How about you?
Hey, you know what? We just got into the Phantom Menace, and I'm very excited.
So as much as I don't want to give, unfair credit to live action versus animation, because I think it's, as much as I have gotten more into the animation than I have been in the past, and I'm the first to admit that it took me a little bit to get into, at the time, Clone Wars, because it was animated. I had a little bias towards animation, but I think I'm past that now. I still am excited to be jumping from the animation to the live action, since we're doing this now chronologically. And starting off with Phantom, I feel like, you can say what you will, and without, disparaging animation, you get amazing vocal performances, amazing art, which we didn't really talk about the art, and maybe we should consider that next Tales of the Jedi we get into. But I feel like you get an added layer within the performance of the actors within live action. So I am excited about that.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm excited for this as well, and just seeing some context from previous week's episodes of Tales of the Jedi. It kind of ties in a little bit with Phantom Menace, so I'm excited to integrate that with the stories, because when we all grew up, we were pretty much going through 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, and we didn't really have too much of that historical context of what happened before episode 1. So now that we kind of have Tales of the Jedi, High Republic, and anything and any other content out there, it'll be interesting to see how we can connect this to live action stuff.
Yeah,
Couldn't agree more. That being said, let's dive into it.
Yeah, well, I think we have to start with something that's not present in the last few episodes, and that will always just make my heart flutter, is the opening title. I mean, we get not just the amazing music, but we get that title crawl, the prequel to the movie we're about to watch. We get that, that little bit of information, which not a lot of movies do that. It's not a very common thing to give you a backstory before the movie starts. I mean, it might have been a thing of the time with some other sci-fi movies that maybe I haven't seen, but one of the big things this time around, because obviously this is a rewatch for us, I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen Phantom Menace, but it's definitely been a lot. But this time I really wanted to, pay a lot of attention to that opening crawl. And one of the things I noticed was, it says during the crawl, one of the lines is that the taxation of trade routes was the reason the Trade Federation started doing what they were doing. So I kind of found that a little funny, that it was a group of people that apparently were being taxed and found that unfair. So they decided, obviously, we know they're being controlled and they're just puppets in a sense, but it seems like what got them going was, taxation, dare I say, without representation.
I knew you were gonna go there. I knew you were gonna.
I gotta bring it. I mean, it's kind of funny that the villains of this story are technically rebelling or acting out for the same reason that America originally rebelled. And at the same time, I'm using the term rebel, when in the future the heroes of our story later on are the rebellion. And it's kind of interesting that you have this Senate out in Coruscant that apparently is deciding things, and this route is getting taxed, and now that's upsetting them. I don't know. I found that kind of interesting right off the bat. I don't know if we want to go into that a little bit more.
I mean, we can, absolutely. It's I mean, going back to the opening title crawl, like you said, two things. One, just seeing it gives you tingle, excited feeling, because as Star Wars fans, when you see it, you're buckled in, you're ready to just watch a great movie. then as it goes on, it's just like, yeah. And then going back to the title crawl, when we previously talked about Tales of the Jedi, we're talking about Dooku and the Jedi being dispatched at the Senators, but this time it's secretly used by the Supreme Chancellor that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are being sent. Nobody really knows about it, but it's retailing back to the whole idea that the Jedi are being used for the Senate. And, you know, the Republic, they're not actually doing their fulfilled duties as Jedi.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of find that interesting. Just like you said, Tom. Yeah, they're being puppets of the Senate or the Supreme Chancellor at this point, but you would think it'd be more diplomatic and just the way they're going about it. They're really doing everything they can to essentially put this under the rug and like cover this up. It's just like you would think that with this kind of a thing, people would be more aware of it. But yeah, it just seems a little sketchy after watching the Tales of the Jedi episode that the Republic is still operating the way Dooku saw it in last week's episode.
Very interesting. So from the title, we immediately get and it's funny, and it might be a reoccurring theme that Star Wars episodes and movies, I think it is, start off with vehicles. It's the ship. It tends to be the first shot, I feel like, every time. We talk about it first, and that tends to be, again, a reoccurring trope. But so vehicles. I mean, we start off with this new Republic vehicle coming in, the transport. We then also see the Trade Federation's, what do we call it? Is it a ship? Is it a base? I don't know.
Battleship.
Is it the battleship? The little, globe with the ring
Yeah, I
around
would
it.
call it a battleship. Yeah.
So we see that, and then pretty quickly, almost as soon as they land within it, we see, which I don't know the name again. I'm going to be bad with names tonight, I think, because I didn't get any help from the subtitles. The droid ships. The one they're literally inside the battleship. They're walking around.
They're just droid starfighters. I mean, I don't know what the technical name. Yeah.
Like they literally are just like chilling, but then when we see them later, they literally go like this and take off, and they're there.
I thought they were like vulture droids or something like that.
That sounds right.
I think,
sounds very familiar.
Yeah, their name probably got changed like after like the Clone Wars and stuff. But I think for episode 1 purposes, they were probably referred to as droid starfighters. But yeah, you see the walking form, and then you would see them in flight.
That makes sense.
Now, for me, and this is going back, not now as much, but recollection of originally watching this or early on, and the Trade Federation's battleships remind me a little bit of, this is hard to do because it's these guys right here, right? It kind of, for me, reminds you of a little Death Star with a ring around it. And I can't really think of, besides this, and obviously we have future Star Wars stuff to watch, but if can't help but talk about this without kind of referencing the original trilogy a little bit, because that's where we started, but I don't want to dive too deep into it. But we didn't really, there's no other ship that was kind of like, circular or spherical, I should say. So this kind of, I remember seeing it for the first time and being like, ooh, it's like little Death Stars with a ring around it, because
it's like the first ship that has like an outer rim defense, in a sense, where it's pretty much like the center of how it operates is in the middle, and the outside is pretty much more of like just where all the flying their droid pilots are.
Well, even ships in general, if you think of beyond Star Wars and other realistic ships, planes, spaceships, their actual, rockets that we use, or other forms of sci-fi and other shows. Can you really think of anyone that went with like a spherical ship? And I mean, and I'm saying ship. Death Star obviously wasn't really a ship; it was a base, and was more, that, again, without going too deep into it, but that's no moon. Like, it's spherical. I feel like even looking at Mike's background right now, above his head's a bunch of different ship speeders, and none of them are spherical. So it's definitely a very unique kind of design. originally with the Death Star, and then I think going into this Trade Federation ship, where it's a sphere with kind of a ring, almost looks like a planet again in a sense, a little like Saturn-esque maybe, but certainly not what you would think of a ship, at least for me. I don't know.
Yeah, so just going back to the first ship, like that was considered a consular class cruiser, and that was the ship I was expecting with the original Tales of the Jedi episode. So
Gotcha.
I thought they would do a throwback to that kind of a ship versus using the other shuttle design that we see in the Clone Wars. But yeah, no, I mean it's definitely like you said, kind of reminiscent. There are kind of like some references to the original trilogy throughout of it, and I think you pretty much nailed it with the Trade Federation ship having like that Death Star orb in the middle. So yeah, I think we'll probably see some nodes and homages to the original trilogy throughout. So that was a good catch.
Yeah, and besides that, we first saw like two different droids. We saw our first like B1 battle droid, and we saw our first protocol droid, TC-14, I believe that's the name.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yep. TC-14. You're right. Which again, for us OT nerds that started off with the original trilogy, seeing that for the first time, you're like, C3PO? Wait, what? I mean, we know there are other protocol droids that look like that because we're introduced to one in, is it Empire? There is another protocol droid. But that was kind of a cool, a lot of droids. I don't want to jump ahead, but I do have a fun droid thing I noticed this one that we need to get back to. But to finish up at least the main ship, I don't know if you noticed the communication on the ship when the Viceroy is communicating with Queen Amidala on the planet.
Yeah,
he's using like a plasma screen situation going on where he's like staring at a screen and it's like ripply. But then the rest of the movie, all the communication is our usual hologram communication. And I can't think of, and I've only watched Clone Wars maybe through once, so maybe we'll get more of it there. I can't really think of that tech, which is even a deeper dive than vehicles, but that tech being used again of this like a hologram, or not even a hologram, like a plasma. I want to call it a plasma screen because it seemed very like it almost reminded me of what the Terminator was it the second one, the liquid Terminator. Like he kind of came in like metallic-y,
or
like
something like that. Yeah,
liquid.
yeah,
or for more our generation than Terminator, Alex Mack. Remember
Alex Mack. Oh, the Secret World of
I
Alex
don't want to
Mack.
diverge too much, but it was like that, and then we don't see it again. The everyone starts talking to each other via holograms after that. So that was interesting. That they just kind of,
and then the holograms and then the comlinks too. Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think we've ever. I mean, other than the Trade Federation ship, yeah, can't really think of anything else because a lot of times when there's like ship to ship communications or ship to planet side, it's always a hologram.
Yeah, and I think maybe at the time it was just a victim of the new technology in CGI and filmmaking. They're like, hey, we can do this. Yeah, that'd be cool. Let's do that. And then they just didn't do it again. So that was interesting. But from the droids, I think our next real works out. Obviously, the ambush occurs. The ship gets blown up inside the ship. And then our two heroes, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, are left, to deal with toxic gas or poisonous gas.
Yeah.
But then we get some force power. We get force push. They attempt to break in with their lightsabers. We get our next droid. Let's go into that. Then we get the droideka, also referred to as destroyers.
Yes.
That appear and they're not just droids, they're droids with shields.
Generators.
Shield generators, yep. Cool. I think we also saw maybe like a force jump when they jumped out of the door.
Oh, you're getting ahead of her. No, wait. So yes, but you're getting ahead of us. Before we hop, I wanna talk a little bit about the droidekas because I think they're
Before we get into it, I want to just throw this out here with the toxic gas thing. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when you saw the TC-14 walk out and goes, "Oh, excuse me," one side of the room was green, the other side of the smoke was blue, and then it turned out the blue side was Qui-Gon with the green lightsaber, and the blue side or the green side of the room was blue was Obi-Wan.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's called Dioxis. I think Qui-Gon name dropped that when they were in the room.
And they just hold their breath, which is also weird because later on they use breathing devices on Naboo that I assume were in their pockets. I don't know if those devices can filter gas also.
But also,
droidicas, battle droid, or they're droidicas or destroyers. I believe the Gungans, which or not the Gungans. I'm sorry, the Viceroy, which the Trade Federation. Do we know their species?
Nemoidians.
Nemodian.
So that's another species we get, but they're they refer to them as droidicas.
Yeah.
And then Obi-Wan refers to them as destroyers. Cool. I mean, it's a cool design for a droid.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I'm a big fan of them. I really, they roll up. They got the question is, oh, how do you defeat the shield? What do you do? And then this is where we get the only use in the entire Star Wars, at least live action, of force speed. Because Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan zip out of there really fast. Now, I know there's been rumors and discussion that it wasn't actually force.
Hold on. That is 100% true.
Now, I know from playing the games, games, specifically Knights of the Old Republic, which we won't go into, but that you can unlock burst of speed, force speed. So I know it became a thing after the fact. I've heard rumors that it wasn't actually for speed, it was an editing issue. And that it's like a jump shot and it kind of messed up a little bit and they just left it in. I don't know if that's actually true or if the idea was there's force speed that we've never seen used before or since. But they fly at it. They're
gone.
Mm-hmm.
So because I play the games, I'm gonna go ahead and subscribe to the fact that it was in fact force speed, and they do have that ability. And they just choose to never use it again because they never need to go anywhere fast, I guess. But
I kind of want to detail
through closing shields that are going to prevent your master from getting killed by Darth Maul. Spoilers. But we can discuss that force speed later and maybe point out times where it would come in handy and they chose not to use it.
I like that.
I'm a bit of a hater right now, and I apologize, but it's it's just interesting.
But going back to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan just a little bit, just to track back, when we talk about, since we're doing this in order, we talked about Dooku and Qui-Gon being this apprentice, and it's always been the whole mindset of, you heard Qui-Gon in that quote, is be mindful. These Trade Federation are cowards, be mindful. He's just pretty much reverting to his teachings and his training from what Dooku has taught him. It's just pretty much like, listen, don't come in here thinking, we're going to get this done. There may be more to it. So be mindful, use your surroundings, use your senses, just trust yourself, trust in the force and stuff like that.
Be mindful of the moment. Yeah.
So we then get, obviously, Mike, I think you noticed that there's definitely a little more Jedi force powers with the landing, because you're right, they jump from a pretty significant height and they land like cats. It's very impressive. So I definitely think that is a little more force Jedi jump landing thing. Then we get a bunch more vehicles. We get Trade Federation, I'm going to call them droid. Well, one, we get transport ships, the ships that are going to take them down to Naboo.
Yep.
We get like the vehicles that just carry. We don't know that they're carrying just rows and rows of the droids. We also get, once we're on Naboo, these like droid, I'm gonna call them segways. I mean, they're speeders, but the way the droids are standing on them, they're like little segways, which is kind
We
of
also
neat.
have tanks.
And we do get tanks. And also, I caught a little bit in the background another vehicle that was like transporting the droids, but it was completely open and you could just see the droids.
Like a bus or something.
Yeah, yeah. There was like 2 shots of it where I was like, oh, look at that. I don't remember really seeing that again.
Yes, I think the names were like the landing craft, and you had the MTT, which was the multi-troop transport. And then to Tom's point, there was also the tank, which was the AAT, which is called the Armored Assault Tank.
So now we've landed on Naboo, and we get introduced to a new species, a very contentious species, but we meet Jar Jar Binks. Love him or hate him, a notorious Star Wars character. We get Jar Jar, and we get a little more force use, a couple more force pushes, I think, to save him.
I think we get a little bit more like a faster defensive lightsaber skill set going on so far from what we've seen. With the way Qui-Gon just pulled out the lightsaber and just deflected the bolts, and it's we're at the point where it's just like we're watching Jedi use their abilities to the best of their their skill set.
And yeah, even Obi-Wan's doing some crazy stuff with his lightsaber. It was definitely entertaining.
Yeah, like you said, Tom, I think it was like more defensive. You didn't really, I mean, they were deflecting bolts. I mean, they were slashing things up where they could, but it's mostly defensive. And I think I remember from like reading like the novels, like from back in the day, I don't kind of question like, were lightsabers really resilient to like water or other things? Because like you see Obi-Wan like running away from it, and, like just diving into the books, you realize that, oh crap, something happened. Obi-Wan's lightsaber shortened out for some reason. So I mean, you kind of see like how the lightsaber changes throughout the movie, but yeah, just going back to like the original books, which kind of expanded upon the films, that was kind of the reason why Obi-Wan ran away versus deflecting the bolts back at the staff, which was another vehicle that came about, and that stands for a single trooper aerial platform. So
Segue.
Segue, yeah.
We do, to bounce back a little, we do see another use of the lightsaber. When Qui-Gon's trying to get into the door, he's basically just using it to like melt metal and blast shield doors, and he's really cutting through it. So we kind of learn here, like, oh, the lightsaber is not just going to deflect bullets and strike people down or droids down. It's gonna it can really cut through things, because it was making his way. If those droidicas didn't show up, they would have been in Viceroy's chambers real quick.
It was an unorthodox way of using a lightsaber in a way.
So we get Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan meet Jar Jar, and they go to the hidden Gungan city underwater. We get them to pull out from their pockets, because now we know Jedi robes have pockets. They pull out their underwater breathing apparatuses that they thought were important to bring to negotiations regarding trade routes. But they thankfully they had those, and they managed to go and meet Boss Nast and
Gungan
also meet in Gungan City. And I wrote down the name and now I lost it, of Jar Jar's buddy.
Captain Tarpals, who
thank you. Yes. Captain Tarpals. So we meet a bunch of them, and then we get our next force use of the force, and in the best way, probably everyone's, at least my favorite use of the force, is the Jedi mind trick, right? Qui-Gon, watching it again, I don't think Qui-Gon said anything to Boss without doing every single thing he was saying. He was like just doing the mind trick to persuade him to get exactly what he wanted, and then they head off to the core.
Well, then you have going back to like the whole living force thing. I mean, also they could have just gone with their mission, but Qui-Gon's like, wait a minute, Jar Jar Binks. I gotta help him out here. And then we dive into a little bit about like the Gungan culture of like when you save someone, you have the life debt. So it's like, and it's demanded by the gods. So that's why Qui-Gon was like, well, wait, let me go back and see if I can free Jar Jar from this, because who knows? I mean, it could be a what if scenario. Like, what if Qui-Gon didn't free Jar Jar? What would have happened to Jar Jar, seeing that he committed crimes in the past and now he came back again? What would have happened had had they just went their way?
Yeah. Would they have even, been successful? Because we know in the future Jar Jar is very successful at convincing a very important alliance to form. So we'll get to that too. The next part, it gets a little, the order, but this is pretty important. We kind of skipped over the hologram discussion that originally occurred between the head of the Trade Federation, the Viceroy, and Darth Sidious. So they meet him the first time via, telling him, oh, they're here and they're Jedi. What should we do? And he says, kill them. But now the second time we get another conversation where he basically says, start the invasion. One thing I noticed during this conversation was in the background, there was a whole line of droids that marched by. I don't know if you guys noticed these droids. They were gray and they had heads that looked like maybe like the Pixar lamp almost. They're not droids I've ever seen at any other time in Star Wars. And I will try to find that picture and post that on social for us. But if you look back, they were droids I've never seen again, and I'd argue that they're not in this. I mean, I don't know if you guys kind of reminded me a little bit of the character from the recent Ant-Man movie, that like kind of like lantern head thing going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they marched in the background, and I was like, what are those? And they were just there on the ship, and I don't think we ever hear or see from them again.
Yeah, I mean, now that you like describe them more, it kind of reminds me of like I think those are ones that were like in the old Lego Star Wars games. So I think I know where you're going with it. But again, these are droids that don't have blasters, so it's like
So Lego Star Wars might have picked them up too and been like, oh, hey, these are in the background. Let's make these characters.
yeah.
Tom, I don't know if you can maybe find some information on the random lantern droids in the background of this. But I noticed that moving right along, knowing that we're running short on time, but the next thing, very important, we get a shot of Queen Amidala sadly staring out a window during the invasion. And she's wearing a red dress with like kind of glowing orbs at the bottom. The next scene is Queen Amidala in a black dress walking down the stairs with the Viceroy and the rest of her posse after being captured. And you'll notice next to her is, in fact, Natalie Portman as Padme. So we know that black dress Queen Amidala is not, in fact, the queen. And because of the very quick costume change, I'm assuming that red dress Amidala in the individual shot is, in fact, Padme. Spoilers if you've never seen this before, but in our next episode, things are going to get revealed. Maybe.
So I just got a little update. I really don't know what the name of those droids are because
I'll get a picture and I'll post it up on our socials, and maybe I'll send it to you, Tom, for the edit, and maybe you can flash it up on the screen when we start.
Or if someone on YouTube, if you know, just leave it in the comments.
Yeah. But that so that was interesting that we kind of get that, and obviously not knowing if this is the first time watching what's going on there. It's a very quick costume change, and then the obvious Natalie Portman standing in the background as Padme versus Queen Amidala. With that, obviously, planets we talked about, Naboo, and then we end up at Tatooine, at the end of this episode, but I think this might be a good time unless anybody has. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we completely, they leave Naboo with the rescue happens. They head off, and we get introduced to, I mean, one of the OG best Star Wars characters of all time. Let's be honest. It's our boy. We all love him. It's R2D2, and clearly strong with the Force. He's the only droid that can survive. They know it. We know it. We love him. He's gonna be there for everything. So it's great that we get that introduction finally, because besides Obi-Wan, different actor, young Obi-Wan, this is kind of our first, like, oh, it's the OT. Here we go. We got our first character. But I'm gonna try to speed things up. So let's go on to Tom.
What's up?
I was gonna say let's go to Tom right now with a hot take. I think.
Well, my hot take is going to transition to where we pretty much ended up with, going back to after R2 saves them and they speed up to Tatooine. We get that conversation between Viceroy and Darth Sidious, and then we get introduced to one of the badass characters so far that we know is Darth Maul. And my hot take is, I don't think the Trade Federation were intended to actually do the invasion. They were just afraid of Darth Sidious. And then once Darth Maul got introduced, they just knew they were done. They're in it for good.
Good hot take. And I wrote a couple quotes this time. I'll reference this one because it needs to be referenced, but it's not my quote that I want to talk deep, because there's no deep dive for this quote. But obviously, this is getting out of hand. Now there are two of them is a fantastic quote. Fun for us chronologically, because at this point, from what we've watched so far, this is getting out of hand. Now there are two of them. Chronologically, this is the first mention of the Sith. Mm-hmm. It's the first introduction to two big villains. The past couple ones, it had just been a tiger that gets turned by a baby Ahsoka. We got, a senator that's corrupt who basically gets turned good by his son. And then we get another senator that's basically being forced because of his corruption by his military that pretty much get, again, a son dies and then the next one and in prison. But we don't have like a big bad guy until this point. And not only do we get one big bad guy, we get two of them. So I thought that was interesting. The quote I want to touch on before we get into Mike's deep dive.
We're gonna have to speed things up. We got like 4 minutes.
Yep. No, I got the time. I'm watching it. So the quote I want to get into is, in the beginning, Obi-Wan points out, and Tom, you touched on this a little bit. He goes with he says he has a bad feeling about this, and he talks about not now, but something in the future he's feeling. And Qui-Gon shuts it down. He's like, no, be mindful of the present. But he even mentions that, like, Master Yoda says that he should be mindful of the future. And Qui-Gon, unfortunately, shoots it down. Qui-Gon, who we kind of later learn is very mindful of the present, but doesn't necessarily seem like he has a lot of foresight in what he could be bringing forth. And Obi-Wan, who, you might argue is even stronger in the Force than Qui-Gon eventually, clearly has this inkling of like, something's coming, something bad. It's in the future. I don't know what. And we could say, is it the Emperor? Is it that whole plan? Is it Order 66 that he's thinking like, this is the spark? This is what's happening? Or is it even worse? Is it Darth Vader? Is it, what is it that he's feeling it, and it kind of gets shut down, and it's a little, let's be here right now and present. Don't worry about what's going to happen. And it's kind of interesting if he did, back to Mike's what if, what if he did pay a little more attention to that? What would have happened? So with that, if we want to discuss about that a little bit, we can. We do have a little bit of time, and then
I just want to say this, though. This is the first time we heard the saying, I have a bad feeling about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the hot quotes, I think that we should probably track to see who says it throughout the movies and see if we can find like if it's like one individual, if it's one unique person each time, or if like someone says it recurringly. So I think definitely we need to do that. Yeah, going back to what the two of you were talking about, kind of reminds me of like the earlier Tales of the Jedi episodes, because like Count Dooku kind of instilled that, or is either Count Dooku or Qui-Gon teaching Count Dooku, just being in the present, um, being mindful. So I think with that, you see the teachings like Qui-Gon took those very well from Dooku and passed along to Obi-Wan, and again, just like seeing like the past three episodes, we kind of see that differing perspectives between the Jedi, or like the Jedi Council, versus like Count Dooku and Qui-Gon, who were considered the rebel Jedi's at the time, with their own perspective on things. So let's see. I mean, we only watched like the first half hour of it. So I'll probably save my deep dive like probably towards the end of the movie.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think this is a great start, and definitely, we see references to the original trilogy throughout, as well as some introduction to our OG like R2, and then obviously with the whole, we see the politics and taxation and trade routes going on, but we'll probably dive into that more as we watch more of episode 1 throughout the next coming weeks.
All right. And I think with that, we're at the end of our episode. So, Mike, take it away.
All right, everyone. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for joining Three Simple Men making their way through the galaxy. Hit that like, comment, and subscribe button, and come back next week for some more Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace content. May the Force be with you, always.
Always.
Tune in, gang.